We were photographing and I just showed her the back of the camera and she just said this, wow, that's me. And that was the moment where I realized, or where I kind of learned that people, how they see themselves day in and day out, and versus when you see like how they see themselves in a really, really good photo that you help the person build themselves up to that point is very different. I'm always thinking is how can I get this person 10 steps ahead of how they see, themselves every day in the mirror. And so it just became a constant journey of how do we boost this person's, esteem, their self-value, their ability? How can we create this session around really making this spectacular so that they can't wait to show somebody, hey, this is what I did last weekend with Tia, or hey, this is my new LinkedIn profile. I'm super confident in myself and my business and my skills, starting with the very first thing people see in the LinkedIn profile, which is the photo. I grew up in, or my background is Belizean, that's Caribbean, and African American. And we had a pretty blended household culturally. My mom is from New York, my dad's from the South. And so there was just already a diverse kind of surrounding where I grew up. I grew up in a predominantly Black neighborhood, but I went to a predominantly white school. So it was just very easy for me to see people of different walks of life, different socioeconomic status. My mom, being who she was, she wanted us to get out and see and meet everyone. So we met all sorts of people in her inner circles and as well as my father's as well. So diversity was just something we grew up with. Being in my neighborhood, I just always had this passion to leave because it was just so monotone. It was so single note. I wanted to get out and explore countries, peoples, environments. And it was just always a passion of mine to just be around things that were different to me, just be amongst that. It was really hard, trying to jump from different environment to environment and trying to find the one that fits, trying to find the one that produces a good environment for you to grow. Sometimes it's good for other people, but it's not good for certain people. I'm from the States, and racial politics and racial cultures is a thing in certain areas. And it was really hard. It was really difficult. And then it really came to the forefront when I was in college, when certain situations would happen and then certain conversations stem from it. And it was really hard kind of navigating these conversations when you're trying to both educate somebody of a particular point of view, but at the same time understand, hey, I get your point of view, but please understand this is the reality for people who are like me. And you realize how much people in a majority shape you as a person, especially when you're not a person of that majority. And it was really, really tough. At this point, I'd come to Japan. I'd traveled to Japan before. I'd studied abroad twice, once at Aoyama Gakuin and the second at Kanda University. Japan culturally and Japan itself was just an outlet for me. It was just a third wheel that I didn't have to worry about, man versus woman, Black versus white.
As a political scientist, we're always studying majority-minority politics. I mean, one of the Canadian political philosophers who I fell in love with in my undergraduate was Charles Taylor. And he really talks about cultural recognition or diversity, the recognition of diverse identity, and then the non-recognition of others. And how do you misrecognize others? Constantly misrecognizing them so that they feel unseen. And that majority-minority dynamic kind of leads to, everybody thinks A, and therefore A is the dominant informal norm. And so we see you as B, and you're saying, no, I'm not B. I'm actually like, L, and then having to explain that over. And it gets tiring, right?
It does. It tickles me, you see on certain international spheres. I'm really tired of Japanese people asking me how long I'm going to be here and if I can hold chopsticks. And I'm thinking those kind of questions and expectations that I constantly had to deflect in the United States. Right. I would rather have the can you hold the chopstick question. That's nothing to me compared to some of the other things that you have to immediately disprove right off the bat, away from.
But it can obviously, there's different degrees of what that then feels like constant microaggression, or is it just like innocent ignorance? And we're always stuck in these dichotomies of are you A or are you B? And you're like, well, there's actually 15,000 boxes. We've spoken in the past how in some ways you developed a knack. I think you called it code switching. How did that serve you or disserve you?
Well, it served me quite well because I didn't get bullied by people who thought I spoke improper. But there were moments where if I didn't time it right, or if I used the wrong code in the wrong in the wrong environment, you get called out on both ends. So if I'm
Yeah.
speaking very proper in the neighborhood, then people ask, "Oh, why are you speaking white?" And
Yeah.
if I'm using a little bit too much slang in my science class, and people tend to call me out in that way. Of course, we live in a world, or we live in a country where code switching is the norm, and you have different grammar tenses
Yeah.
for certain situations. So you have your Keigo when you're in a
Right.
formal situation or your business, and you have your casual, but then you have your honorific and humble form. So I mean, the whole
Yeah.
Japanese language is rooted in code switching.
It really is. It's really fascinating because so much gets revealed through that sort of those different levels of code switching.
The beautiful thing about working, because I started my very first job in Japan was I worked in eikaiwa, and I graciously got to avoid that kind of messy hierarchy of conversation because you're supposed to speak English as the English teacher.
Right.
But it did start to become a thing when I became a photographer, because now I'm
Yes.
going, now there's a Soto and Uchi component. And if you're Soto, you have to speak Keigo. I remember like my very first year of, Top Tia, I was building a folio for a model. So we're in the studio. His girlfriend comes and she's looking at everything. She's looking at how I'm communicating with him. And she's just like, nope, 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 that's not good. And the boyfriend, when he gets his pictures, he was saying like, yeah, I really had a fun time, but my girlfriend noticed that, you didn't really talk to me in the way that was appropriate. This is the hierarchy of language. That was my rough introduction to omotenashi and presenting omotenashi to Japanese clients. This year, I photographed some really high level executives.
Yeah.
Make sure you use, teine and keigo, but don't make it too fake sounding, because if you use too much, it sounds like you're being insincere. Make sure you sit near the door, don't sit near the window.
So many rituals,
It's
right?
the ritual.
So many rituals of code switching and hierarchy.
But to me, it became this fun thing that I enjoyed. Jumping those hoops is a lot different than jumping code switching hoops back in the US. My grandmother, I remember this, she was furious that my mother let me get locks because in her mind, locks is an unprofessional hairstyle. So, I mean,
so much hair politics in the States.
Oh man, don't even get me started with hair politics.
Right?
I want my sessions to be these mini environments where the person I'm photographing, all of their inhibitions of they don't look the part, they can't do the part, they can't, can't. I hear so many times, I'm not good at taking photos. This isn't something I normally do. This isn't something I want to do. And so just taking that energy and converting it into something that's fun, something that's empowering, something that they would want to do again, because taking a photo should not be the equivalent of going to the dentist. It should be something that people are really excited about getting ready to do. Just going through what I went through growing up, trying to find that environment where I could grow, where I could thrive. My job is to make you get excited about being photographed, enjoy being photographed, and then look at the amazing work that that person did during the shoot. And a lot of times people say, "Oh, it's all you. You're a great photographer." I was like, "No, it's a collaboration. I'm not you. Somebody's in that photo. It's not me. It's the person in the photo."
I mean, and I think that's so exciting to hear you articulate that photography and a photography shoot, this dedication to creating the safe space in how you approach your photography beyond, the goal of the shoot. It's also about building this rapport so the individual can feel that freedom to be themselves, particularly if they're not feeling super happy with who they are or feeling a strong sense of self-worth. And I think it's interesting that you tie that back to your experiences of building self-worth and then giving that. That's like your gift to your clients who show up in your care for the time of the shoot. That's exciting.